Hey folks, since we have understand the business understanding of this entire use case, let's go ahead and try to implement all the stuffs, of course, using Python programming. So the first and foremost assignment is all about where we have to deal with basic operation. Let's say, hey, can you read the data, and hey, can you perform some basic stats on top of your data? Let's say, hey, can you find the information about your data? These are some of the basic stats that you can think of in context of real world. So first and foremost, we need to read this entire data. Again, first and foremost, let's try to rename the notebook. I will say 1.cora. I will say 1.cora. Let me just make it as Cora. Cool. Let me enter. And this is exactly the name of the notebook. Again, for those of you who are not aware about this pandas, which is extremely useful in case of data manipulation and data exploration, extensively used module. Again, for numerical stuff or for numerical Python, we have a frequent used module often known as NumPy. Again, in case of data visualization, you can think of using Seaborn, and again, you can also think of using something known as Matplotlib, which is nothing but a base module. And of course, on top of this Matplotlib, all other data visualization library, whether it is Seaborn, whether it is Plotly, whether it is Bokeh, these all modules are typically built having a base as Matplotlib. So for those of you who are not aware about all these modules, please feel free to share with us your issues that we are not aware about any other module or any other function of this module via the Q&A. We will try to share some of the amazing blog, or if possible, we will also try to add some tutorials for you. So we will highly recommend you just use this golden opportunity. So very first, let's try to import all this stuff. So I'm going to say import pandas, and I'm going to create its alias, let's say speedy. Then I'm going to import one of the extremely used module, which is all about my NumPy, which is extensively used in case of numerical stuff. Let's say, hey, can you obtain or can you return us what exactly is the mean of this feature? In such scenarios, you can think of using NumPy on top of that feature. Again, for data visualization, I can say cool, let's import Matplotlib, and from this Matplotlib, let's go inside Python plot, which is a sub module, and let's create its alias, let's say PLT. Let me import some interactive data visualization module, often known as Seaborn. I'm going to create, let's create its alias, let's say SNS. Let me execute it. The moment I will execute this line of code, now what we need to do is we need to read our data. Again, let me show you one more thing. You can see this is the data set that we have to read, and you will see this is exactly of CSV format, which is all about our comma separated values. It means we have to call that function that can read this CSV file. So I will say pd.read underscore CSV. Read underscore CSV is extremely useful when you have to read a CSV format data. So if I will press Shift plus Tab over there, you can check out its entire documentation, what are all parameters this function basically receives. First and foremost, we have to pass some file path. It means where exactly that file is available. Let me copy this entire file path. I will say this is my file path. I will just paste this entire file path, and my data set is all about train.csv. I will say train.csv. Cool. Let me append a raw string that is all about R, which helps Python just to operate or just to read this file, which is my train.csv, very efficiently. I will say cool. Let me store its data frame object, or again, this function typically returns our data frame object. Let me store this in, let's say, df, and let me just execute this line of code. And if I'm going to say df.head, let me pass some value, let's say 3. This function typically returns, this head function typically returns the first 3 observations if I will pass a value as 3. The moment I will execute, you will see you have the first 3 observations of your data set. Now you will see you have some ID, you have some question ID 1, question ID 2, you have some question 1, you have some question 2. And then you have an output label, whether both the questions are duplicate or not. On the other hand, one typically says, hey, both the questions are duplicate. So if I will say df.shape, shape is typically a property of my data frame. The moment I will execute, you will see you have that much number of observations or data points, and along with that you have 6 features or 6 attributes, of course, in your data set. Similarly, if I will say df.info, the moment I will execute this line of code, you can see, hey, this is typically the entire information about my data. It says, hey, this is a feature which is my ID. It has that much number of non-null values and its data type is all about int64. Similarly, QID1, which is a feature, it has that much non-null values and its data type is all about int64. This is all about our basic information of our data. And again, if I will say, let's say df dot columns, the moment I will call the columns property on top of that, it says, hey, it will return a list data structure having all the feature name. It says, hey, you have all these features in your df data frame. Now let's try to find some basic stats of your data. So if I will say, hey, can you find the distribution of data points among your output classes? Again, output is or your output label is typically my is duplicate, which is of course my binary feature. It means it has entry as 0 and it has entry as 1. 0 basically means quotient 1 and quotient 2 are not similar, and 1 basically means they are similar. So what I can do is I can say, cool, hey, can you find the count? Let's say with respect to 0, I have, let's say, count as, let's say, 40k. Similarly, with respect to 1, I have count as, let's say, 50k, which basically means with respect to 0, it means there are 40k observations where my quotients are not duplicate. On the other hand, we have 50k observations where my quotients are duplicate. Hey, can you find all these stuff? And hey, can you plot its bar plot? Can you plot that? So let's try to code up all the stuff using Python. So we will say df of is underscore duplicate. Let me press tab over there. The moment I will execute, you will see you have all these values. Of course, all the values are in either in 1 or in 0. On top of that, if I will call the value underscore counts, the moment I will execute this line of code, it says, hey, with respect to 0, you have that much count. This typically return a frequency table, or you can say with respect to each of the subcategory, there is some count associated over here. So again, if you need just its bar plot, I will say on top of this, just call a plot function of your pandas module. And again, by default, this will plot a line chart. So let's try to customize it. So I will say kind equals to bar. The moment I will do this and the moment I will execute, you will end up getting a bar chart. And it says, hey, with respect to 0, you have that much bar chart. Again, if you want to showcase the results, I will say this is typically the result that we have, and this is basically my bar chart. Similarly, hey, can you find what exactly is the percentage where my quotients are not duplicate? So I will say, cool, this is typically all about nothing but this one. Now what we have to do is we have to divide it to the total length of the data frame. I will say len of df. The moment I will execute, you will end up getting all the stuff. Now we need to just multiply all the stuffs into 100 because we need all the stuff in the form of percentage. Let me execute this line of code. It says, hey, there are 63% total data points in which my quotients are not duplicate, whereas approx 36% data points where my quotients are duplicate. That's what this stands for. Similarly, if I will say, hey, what is the length of data frame? The moment I will execute, it means these are nothing but the length of the data frame, which says, hey, the total number of the quotient pair for training is all about 404290. This is typically the count. So that's all about this session. Again, for those of you who have any doubts with respect to this session, feel free to share with us via the Q&A. That's all about it. Thank you. Have a nice day. Keep learning, keep growing, keep practicing.